Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cryptid Creator Corner. I'm Byron O'Neill, your host for our Comics Creator Chat. Today, I'm welcoming a true boss on the show with me today. Not Bruce Springsteen, not Hugo Boss, and not Tony Danza, if you're old enough to remember who's the boss. No, I've got first-time guest Tyler Boss. He's hanging out with me to discuss his 5-issue spin-off series from the Exquisite Corpses universe, detailing the nefarious exploits of New York's own vociferous furry Rascal Randy. Tyler, how you doing?
I'm good, Brian. That was an amazing intro. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, vociferous is such a great word. I was like, oh, I've got to use this somehow. I got to work this in. So, yeah.
Great use
Well,
of it.
before
Yeah.
we dive into, thank you. Well, before we dive into Rascal Randy, I wanted to tee on your friend's journey out to Roswell. I was scrolling through Instagram over the weekend,
Mm.
came across a video of you doodling aliens on the Tiny Onion office doors. So, what's he up to out in the desert?
Yeah. So he's my friend. He's a middle school math teacher, and
Okay.
him and his friends. Oh, I'm so sorry. One second. There's a person who decided to start weed whacking the single key start of this. Um, he drove out to Roswell with a gang of his other fellow school teachers, and he lives in Colorado, so I don't think it was too brutal a drive, maybe like 10 hours. And
Okay.
yeah, checking out, trying to find the aliens, trying to get into Area 51. Went to I can't remember the name of the cave, but there's a cave there. They said it's amazing.
Okay.
I'm hoping that he doesn't get into cave diving. I don't want to get one of those text messages from him that he's stuck. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I have done that myself. When I was younger, we mapped out some caves, and I was done at this point, but the Lost Sea, which is in East Tennessee, where I was living, where I grew up and everything, as the name implies, there's an underground lake, and we had gotten into this situation where we were crawling with no room to basically turn around for about 2 hours,
Oh
and
my
we
god.
unfortunately had a novice with us, and basically got to water. So it was gonna be a elbows and knees and, backwards crawl out for hours, and that person freaked out.
Oh,
So I was like,
I mean, I would say I can't blame them because I'm freaked out hearing this story. But oh my, so you do this? You
used to, used
used to?
to,
Okay.
used to. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, the cave stuff was a lot of fun. I did rescue certification because my roommates were actually both firefighters and EMTs, so I just tagged along on all these extra things, so I had weird certifications for wildland firefighting and cave rescue and mountain rescue, and it was just because on the weekends, I was bored and I could just hang out and do it with them. So
That's amazing.
yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like you should be the subject of the podcast, not me. That's way more interesting than anything I'm gonna have to say.
Well, if your friend is from Colorado, I'm very curious there if you know if they've gotten down to the San Luis Valley, because we lived in Colorado for 3 years when my wife was in grad school, and there's a UFO watchtower there, and these reports of strange lights that date back, like, hundreds of years in that valley, and other weird things like livestock mutilations and Native American folklore about ant people. So, there's all kinds of cool stuff. Has he been down there? Do you know?
No, I see. This is relatively new for him, sort of getting interested in extraterrestrials. But my wife is I like to say she's just shy of a MUFON card carrying member. Just the handbook is a little
Okay.
too expensive for my for my blood. But no,
Understood.
she's a true fanatic for it. And osmosis through there, my friend started getting into it, and so he's coming at her from just normal Colorado outdoors guy. But
Okay.
he's I think he's interested in learning about disclosure.
Nice. Well, I mean, I guess there's a lot of stuff coming out right now, but
Yeah, I mean some
anyway.
of that dump. Sorry, just not the graphic designer's gold mine. That last disclosure dump. If you go through the sort of released photos and things, there's beautiful sort of like there's some natural compositions and different things you can find in there that you know uh, texture packs and things from I don't know that last huge dump that was like a month ago.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. I'm not like an Art Bell, coast to coast AM true, dyed in the wool believer here myself. Like, are aliens out there? Yeah, I totally believe they are. I mean, like, look, the universe is a big, big place.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, of course. But yeah, but anyway, before we get too into weeds here,
Sure,
let's get
sure.
into Rascal Randy.
Yeah.
Um, I read the advance issue of number 1, and it did not go as I expected, and that's a good thing. But I wanna step back a second here because there are 3 spinoffs of the Exquisite Corpses from the season 1.
Mhm,
We have Rascal Randy, Fox Mask Killer, and The Lone Gunman.
mhm.
So how did we settle on those 3 specifically amongst a group of 12? Because it's not quite as linear as Last 3 Standing?
Yeah. No, for sure. I think, there's some, uh happy accident in the sense where I think me, Shea Grayson, and Pornsec, Finch and Schott, who are all writing the spinoffs, sort of gravitated towards those characters. And
Okay.
those characters also sort of seemed to hit with fans of the series and readers. And so there was a great sort of kismet that was met where it was like, you know, from day one when we started the way we started the writers room was by playing the game. And I think I chose Randy, Pornsack chose Lone Gunman, and Jake chose Fox Mask, and it just so it's just sort of this weird natural progression of this thing. Um,
Okay.
and so that's and then yeah, I connect with fans. I also think it helps that all three of those killers have very iconic looks, and then they also
Yeah.
end up sort of stacking up on the trades. I think Volume One's Fox Mask, Volume Two's Randy, and then Volume Three is going to be Lone Gunman. So it's one of those things where it's like it wasn't planned this way, and but it sort of ended up becoming the plan just through you know I think natural creative inclination.
Okay, that's cool synchronicity
Yeah,
that
yeah.
it just worked out that way. Nice. Well, spoiler here for people who haven't read the original series, but the lone gunman that started was not the lone gunman that finished. And I was chatting with Michael Walsh before all this started, and we were discussing that one of the strength of the series wasn't going to be necessarily the identity of the killers as people, but with the interchangeability of their props and how that created could create a sense of like handed down, if you will, legacy that
Mhm.
allowed the seasons to kind of go in different directions. I don't know, obviously, what's in store for season 2, but he had sort of hinted that we could go to the past and that sort of thing, or the future, 100 years, whatever. But so that's kind of something that legacy element that you're also exploring with Randy in this. So what differentiates him from everyone else? You said you naturally gravitated to him, so
Yeah, I mean, there was something about you look at all the other killers, and Fox Mask, she's like sexy and cool design, and then Lone Gunman sort of has this ruthless efficiency to him. Even Nurse Pete, there's sort of this like chilling thing of like the Doctor Death sort of idea, and
right.
um, I loved that just the idea of a man in a bunny suit could not only match up against these people, but actually be their better in this game. And something about that sort of cognitive dissonance, I don't know. I always like that, like something like that, where they sort of you juxtapose the weird thing against these other things, and I always think that's the visually fun. It's story wise fun, and also too. I think I'm such a cartoon head, just in the sense where it's like I love cartooning. I love um comics and the idea of like funny animal characters, be it the black and white boon in the 80s of comics, or even going back to strip comics when it's Mickey and whatever. And so I don't know, digging into that felt like super fun I'm a big Al Columbia fan, if you're familiar with that cartoonist. And
Sure.
he's very much in his recent work has sort of been tapping into that idea of like a fake history of animation.
Yeah.
And sort of like treating it almost like Stanley Kubrick's like Eyes Wide Shut Cabal sort of thing. And I think that's a really fun, fertile ground of horror.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Randy has, for me anyway, the best silhouette out of the 12. I don't know, it just resonates for me. And I finally made the connection to where the bloody double teeth thing that he's got going on because it's such an iconic kind of visual element. And it plagued me. And then I finally connected it with James's Batman run and Clayface. So I think that was like Detective 972 or something like that. But it's this really creepy and great visual gag, and it displayed this really interesting level of, like, gestation with sort of the silhouette
Oh
over
yeah.
time with James at the helm. So, is that how he sort of de facto became the Tiny Onion mascot? Like, how did that end up happening? Because he's everywhere now.
Yeah, no, I think that's sort of fan born. I think people really just it's one of those things where like you make something and then, at a certain point it's not fully yours anymore, right? Like you put it out into the public conscience and people sort of responded to Randy, be it at corpse store signings or just like people sending in fan mail and stuff, and so that became yeah, it was funny. We all I mean, I think for a large part too, I think you're kind of either a Fox Mask or a Randy person, and I think, I thought Fox Mask would obviously be the mascot, and then it's very funny now that it does sort of feel like it's Randy. Just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, in the story itself, the kind of, as I alluded to, the big deviation for me from what I expected was that it's more of a mystery, that leans into, I guess, true crime, which is very big right now. It felt a little more Scooby Doo and a little less Michael Myers. And I guess I was expecting the Michael Myers. So, what was compelling for you in taking it in that direction?
So I think with this being the first, spin-off series, there was a level of, when we were in the writer's room, we had a sort of rule where it was our story, you brought this up at the beginning, was always more focused on our civilian characters than on our killer characters. And there is the thing with
Hmm.
Randy where it's like what makes him so compelling is sort of the like just the design and the mystery of it. And so um there's a worry in over explaining him. There's a worry in spending too much time with him. And so my way into that was thinking like, we did this sort of like big Halloween sort of slasher battle royale thing. Let's strip that back. Let's take it to, a summertime slasher, but let's quiet down even more where it's like, okay, we're dealing with teenagers. We're dealing with them with, the boring summer malaise of, New York summers in a small town and take it back to the core of corpses, what readers enjoyed so much off the rip. And then, bring in this new cast of characters that then they get to relate to Randy. But then we're also, you don't see it a lot in issue one, but issue two opens with it. We're kind of jumping around in time. Issue two, we open and we're in 1920. Later issues will be in 1930, it will be in 2009, and there's this sort of recursive logic where things that are happening in our present day of the book are being informed and informing things that are happening in the past and vice versa. And so these scenes sort of weave in and out of each other to try and tell maybe not necessarily what people would think as the story of the person in the suit, but the story of Rascal Randy. And so that was an angle where I thought, here's how we can learn and find out these different horrors that come from this character that isn't necessarily okay. Here's a guy for 5 issues. We're gonna watch him walk around and kill people.
Sure. Yeah. That just gets, yeah, that was my next question. Is It was really fascinating because that typical slasher vehicle, it's always the question of how far the reader is willing to go with you on the journey before it just becomes sort of a celebration of violence,
Yeah.
which, right. I don't find that really all that personally compelling. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing where it's like I love B horror movies and even C horror movies,
yeah,
Red Palm, and some of that is like if it is just brutal violence, you're getting into a different thing where oh, I'm enjoying the craft of how they did the practical effects or how they did these things where it's not so much, but this one, yeah, it is a thing where we really wanted you to like our new cast of characters. Lily and Eli are sort of our two mains, and the town that we're in. I a lot of my books for whatever reason, maybe it's just the thing I'm interested in. They all sort of take place in these small town mysteries and the things
yep,
that can happen within those. And I just think that's such fertile ground. And then bringing in a slasher character, kind of with it with Randy, but he's more complicated than that. Hopefully, he's kind of textured. Based upon the history that we're going to show, be it from his original creator to some of the other peoples who have tried to shape his story. Um, and yeah, so I think yeah, really was just our biggest thing was trying to hopefully make sure that people liked and bought in on our new characters, Lily and Eli, because I think that's really what's going to make or break the book for people is if you want to spend time with them.
yeah, absolutely. You just alluded to that. You do often focus on small towns, and the other thing that you focus on a lot of times is just that window of adolescence. So those two things as a narrative combo,
Mhm.
it seems like I don't know, your safe space to some degree. So what's comfortable about writing those two things kind of in combination? What do you love about that mixture?
I think that's a thing where I'm always wrestling with that, like sort of looking back on my own life or whatever. I think every person sort of goes through it. That age is so interesting because you're in this weird stage where you're exiting childhood and you still maybe have some of the interests you've had from there, but you've graduated now to like, okay, there's this whole new world of different things that I can get interested in. Is it music? Is it sports? Is it um comics, art? Is it corporate finance? Like whatever people get into, they start to find these different things to try out, but it doesn't feel like it has to define you yet. Um, and so it's a hard age. You're kind of you're going 0 to 60 as far as, yeah, childhood into this sort of pre-full adult space, and so I think in some ways everything feels more immediate and tactile than as we get older, maybe things don't feel as prescient or as all-encompassing, and so there's an urgency to that age too, and I think what's nice
Sure.
about pairing that against Randy, where it's like Randy kinda is that, right? Like, he's this perversion of a thing where it's like, okay, this is a funny furry animal character who, we when we look at him associate childhood probably with it, and then to twist it and then have that face off against these characters felt like um the right way to explore them.
Okay. Yeah, what I found really compelling through that read through was visually we're also getting a lot of branding, with Randy.
Mhm.
So you have just a Jessica Rabbit character. There's the bar. There's a notable tattoo, and if I'm not mistaken, there's even a Volkswagen Rabbit car
Yes.
that's
Yep.
like thrown in there. And I don't know if we get bombarded with this on a nearly constant basis that you need to craft a quote brand, right? That you hear that all the time.
Mhm.
And it makes me want to puke, but it's relevant to the story. And I can't help but make a connection to that and that inherent duality of the human and that shift of identity that is imparted by just donning a costume,
Yeah.
you know? So
You're
I thought that was really fascinating.
And you touch on it there too. I mean, we have in the first issue, you see it, there's a whole room, almost like a church dedicated to this character of memorabilia and cups and things like that. And what you said there, we kind of touch on that immediately in issue 2 too, like, not to get too ahead of myself, but there is a thing where, we meet Randy's original creator in 1920, and we sort of see how he went from, I was just trying to make this funny little cartoon to make my wife laugh. Like, that was the height of my ambition with this thing. And then you'll watch
Okay.
that kind of get taken from him and morphed into something else. And yeah, no, there is a interesting interplay between art and commerce that's sort of happening always in our lives, but in the book we're talking about it a little bit where it's just this, these things we create and how they get taken from us and maybe you manipulated and sort of bastardized into, not our intention, or less the intentions of people we'd prefer never had anything to do with it.
Yeah, and you get that sense of attachment too in a different way. You were talking about being an adolescent and that being the window for you creating some connectedness, with something else, whatever that is, sports, comics, what have you. But it's fascinating to look at it through the lens of especially a children's, costume specifically. Death to Smoochie is one of my absolute favorite all-time movies.
Yeah, yeah.
So I like the dark comedy aspect twist of those kinds of things, but it also lends him an aura uh, of tragedy, to him, to Randy as a character, and I did not expect that.
Yeah, the book is fucking sad sometimes. Like, there's some stuff in it that Dylan Burnett, who's the artist on the book, I'm so grateful to be working with Dylan. He's one of my favorite cartoonists working in the medium today. But what he turned in a page yesterday, the 3-page sequence at the end of issue 3, it works so well, and it's one of those things that you write and you can't wait to get the pages back because you're like, I know he's gonna kill these things. And he added so much little set piece or little set dressing things. I wish I could say more about it, but it is this sort of tragic thing of what you're talking about there, where there is yeah, he's not just it's that we're the art. It's funny because we're trying to fully form this mascot character, and it's not like, some people might be negative and be like, oh, it's a lore dump or something, and that's really not the intent with it. It is to sort of, talk about the birthing of a creative thing and how that can be really sad.
Yeah, and well, there's some generational, like, at least a nod to saying, "Okay, we may delve into some generational trauma moving forward," kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
thing.
It's yeah, not to hit, elevated horror buzzwords, but it is a theme in the book.
Well, with Dylan, I was familiar with his work from Weavers that he did with Cy
Mhm.
Spurrier, so and you guys have worked, I think, together on What's the Furthest Place From Here before,
Yeah, we
so
did an
how
issue
did he
together.
get pulled in?
Yeah, I met Dylan, probably in, like, 2019. He lives in Toronto, I live in Buffalo. We have very similar sort of, like, uh, upbringings that, like skateboarding and playing in punk bands and DIY stuff. So we met and we sort of hit it off. And then when me and Matt were doing, we had sort of mapped out for this place where we wanted to do these sort of side stories or prequel stories. And I always wanted to grab Dylan, but Dylan was doing Arcade Kings, which was his Skybound series that was sort of about like fighting games. Very cool book, but he had an opening in his schedule, and so we did that. And then when it came time for Randy, um, man, I think it was actually, I think offhandedly, I was sort of just raving about Dylan to Eric Harburn at Tiny Onion, who's the editor in chief there. And I guess he just filed that away in his brain. And then, when it came time for Randy, he went, "What about Dylan?" And I would be like, "That would, if he would say yes, that would be awesome. That would be my dream person to do this with." And Dylan was into it. So yeah, it's been awesome. I can't say enough kind words about his work and yeah, I'm really excited for people to see what he's doing on it.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely gorgeous, and I won't give anything away here, but thank you for the subtle Freddy Krueger nod. We can leave it at there,
Okay.
and let readers discover that on their own, but I was like, "Oh, that's so good, that's so good." So, and I got into the true crime thing.
Mhm,
I kinda wanna delve into that, I was really surprised. Like, I'm not a true crime head, but apparently over half of Americans regularly consume true crime content,
mhm.
and demographically, this is dominated by women.
Yes.
So, among other things, when we're in this era of the erosion of institutional trust, and I'm just curious about sort of that inclusion in the book and going that direction. Do you find that, do you think it's as simple as that fascination that everybody has being that binary moral framework that's just easy to understand, right? Good versus evil. Because with the Exquisite Corpses season 1, I started just full disclosure, like, kind of in the middle. I was like, "Okay, we are veering more into horror territory," but the true strength of that series was when it kind of really dug into the people of the town,
Mhm.
you know? So there was that shift. So, maybe I'm just reading more into your intent than is actually there,
No,
but
no, I mean, my previous book before this one was sort of a little bit talking about true crime. My book, You'll Do Bad Things, it's about a former true crime writer who no longer wants to do it anymore. And it's this idea of, he wrote this book and it brought him money and wealth and success and the career that he wanted, or he thought he wanted. But you're sort of standing on the shoulders of these people who are 6 feet under, right? Like these
yeah,
are real people who have had their lives taken from them by some kind of maleficent force. And it's a complicated moral question. You go to why the demographics of say why women mostly listen, or there's a higher percentage of women who listen to true crime stuff than say men. And I think that, we deal with that with Lily a bit in our book, but the idea behind that, or where that comes from is because women are demographically the victims of violence, more
right.
than men, and so
Sure.
there's an inherent fascination with, I think, your own safety. It's almost like I'm terrified of snakes, and so I watch all snake
Okay.
content at all time because I got to know where they're coming from. Where it's the
Yep,
same,
I get that.
yeah, and I think it's a similar thing where when you're the victim of these crimes disproportionately to other people, I think that inherently then you become interested in educating yourself about it and sort of, start to become fascinated by it. Um, and I think with Lily, there's more to her sort of true crime fascination than maybe seems on the surface at first. Um, we open with her. Yeah, she's into true crime, and that's sort of what connects her to the Randy bit of this. But you'll see that grow and change throughout the course of the book, and you'll even figure out where that thing comes from in her, and why she's sort of on that path.
So are you a fan of Snake City? Before I move on, I'm
Wait,
just curious
no,
now.
wait, what's Snake City?
Snake City is fantastic. If you watch stuff about snakes because you're scared of snakes, you should definitely invest in Snake City.
Okay.
So this is a couple, and they're in South Africa, so in Durban, predominantly. But it's on Animal Planet, I think, question mark now. But we've watched the series as a family, and they'll do things like pull black mambas out of, people's basements
Yeah.
all the time, and
I might have
yeah.
to watch that. My, childhood best friend is an environmental scientist who his job
Oh,
is
cool.
basically to, track and chip rattlesnakes. And so he's always, telling me stories about how, like, when they give him anesthesia, or I guess it's anesthesia, whatever it is to, like, sort of calm the rattlesnake down, they lose the ability to breathe on their own. So he's doing as he's chipping the rattlesnake so they can track them and they're nesting to make sure they don't get disturbed or anything, he has to take a little pipette and do little snake CPR the whole time to make sure that
What?
so he's doing to rattlesnakes, snake CPR while he's shipping them, and then he's taking them back out into the deserts of, Salt Lake City, or, Utah, to, make sure they can nest freely. He's also getting into bats, but I'm not scared of bats, so
Oh, bats are incredible.
yeah.
Yeah, I spent in college, I worked in Gary McCracken's bat lab at the University of Tennessee. Never got to do anything quite so fun as the field work. I just wasn't around long enough to do
Mhm.
it, but they would do all kinds. We were sequencing the internationally fruit bat DNA that are in zoos, and in private collections. Like, that sounds terrible coming out of my mouth. I hate that, private collections. Zoos bad enough. Anyway, but we were sequencing all that stuff to make sure, that the population was breeding, diversely
Yeah.
enough. So, yeah. Yeah,
It's
bats are
pretty
great.
cool stuff. Yeah, I always feel like such a dope when I'm talking to him where he's like, "What are you up to?" I was like, "I wrote a weird story about a bunny." And he's like, "I was in the Galapagos working on turtles." So it's
Man, I've got an environmental degree. Why isn't my life that interesting?
I think
But, uh,
yeah, you gotta get out there.
yeah. That was the plan, and then I met my wife and everything changed, but that was the right choice.
Yeah.
There's no regret on that front, so, but anyway, circling back, I'm a big horror fan myself, I always have been, but my relationship to it changed
Mhm.
dramatically when I had a kid, and for years, I just couldn't stomach watching horror movies. Like, I could read books, and that was fine, I could read comic books, that was also fine. Movies, I don't know, they were just a step too far. The thought of something happening to him and just being able to visualize it in that way was traumatizing, right? Anyway, that has since softened, but it got me thinking a lot about because I've just been thinking a whole lot about horror and comics. I was talking to Cy Spurrier last week about Minotaur, and I'm wondering, do comics play a role in commodifying real world trauma? Like now, we talk about generational trauma is basically a trope now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
So
so yeah,
yeah,
body keeps the score. Yeah, I think, it's funny. So my son's 5 months old, and I remember for the first, like, month or whatever, so much of it, me and my wife sort of split shifts, so I would stay up really late with them so that she could get some rest, and then we'd swap. But it'd be like these 5-hour windows where it's like, I don't know if he's gonna be up or down, so we'll just watch movies. And I kept going to watch a bunch of the 2025 releases that were supposed to be great, but I knew they all featured deaths of children or somewhere. It's Train Dreams or Hamnet or If I Had Legs I Would Kick You. And I kept having to turn it off because I couldn't deal with it. Just thinking about my little boy. And it used to be the thing too, where before I had one, I sort of was like, oh yeah, these are good for getting a rise out of people. And now it's definitely recontextualized for me where I cry every time there's something happens to a kid. Um,
yeah,
you know, but I think as far as the commodification and these different things, I'm curious. I mean, you know this, like horror spent so long as sort of like a subgenre of film that people made fun of. It was whatever. It was like if you're into horror, you're kind
yep,
of a weirdo. And now it's become, especially even this past month, right, with Backrooms and Obsession and the box office successes those have been. Um, you kind of wonder in 5 years from now when we look back, where it's like, okay, starting with what was it? Was it? I guess we'll go with The Witch. I feel like that was kind of the first one that sort of brought horror into a mainstream. Oh, this is respectable. Like we can now,
Sure.
wear A24 t-shirts with, Midsummer on it, and everybody thinks it's cool, as opposed to I can't wear my basket head shirt out because people will think it's too weird.
We
And
can celebrate Academy Awards now that are horror movies,
yeah,
right? Like it's definitely changed.
yeah. And so I'm really curious what it's going to look like 5 years from now, what horror looks like. I don't know what the answer where it's, if is it, how does that shift and change? Like, okay, so obviously there's going to be a bunch of liminal horror things coming up, and
Sure.
if generational trauma was this sort of, you go from Hereditary, these buzzwords down the line where it's okay, now we're going to be doing spaces and what the next. So I think it's interesting. It's something that I don't track in my own work, like but it is
Yeah.
something that is sort of that you work in the field, you sort of, oh, that's interesting, this is kind of what audiences are um really vibing with right now. But yeah, I don't know. I think in some ways horror though is really good for people. My wife used to hate watching horror movies. She used to get so scared, did not like the sensation of being scared. Um, and I always was like, I think they're fun. Like it's not about so much being scared, but it's just sort of the the cat and mouse game we're doing of we're creating tension and we know that they're going to pull it at some point. It the practical effects, these different things, and it's all not real. So there's no you just get, like, really it's not like we're watching a documentary, like, if anything, I have a harder time watching those, right? Like, the Night Stalker documentary, I had a
Okay.
really hard time getting through, just because again, it's hard with real people, but now she loves it,
Yeah.
so it's we took our four-month-old to a horror convention, like, 2 weeks ago. Or push him around the
Oh,
stroller,
okay.
like, and he doesn't care, he's a little boy, he's just sort of looking around, but we're, like, at the
Sure.
Vinegar Syndrome table picking up DVDs with the worst names imaginable, being like, "Do we need this?" While we got our little boy sort of sucking on his hand.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I really enjoy hearing that experience too of you being a dad and like your go-to is kind of watching horror movies because mine changed. So my son did not sleep through the night for 5 years. So
Oh, wow.
hopefully your child is way better than that. But
Not
I did
last
the
night.
the lion's share. Sorry, truly am.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
he's a sweet boy.
but yeah, I ended up watching Spartacus. I think that was the one that I remember.
Yeah.
Like he's asleep. I'm trying to keep him asleep, and I've got a Spartacus on an iPad. Anyway, just
I mean, that's
yeah,
that's the fun thing,
fascinating.
those early times with I mean, this is only for maybe the parents in the group, but it was like we read, I called it Spider-Man hours too, because I never read Ultimate Spider-Man, so we just read the
Okay.
entirety of Ultimate Spider-Man, which was like 300 issues or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, pretty good time.
Nice. Well, I want to get into the corpse crew element of this
Yeah.
because I think it's kind of fascinating. In terms of an indie comics exercise, I think this has been certainly one of the more interesting franchises I can remember with this diverse group of writers and other collaborators who have kind of gotten into to making this world of crafting it much more like a TV writing room than anything else. So, what's your experience been like with that?
Uh, so this was my first experience ever being in a writer's room or in any context like this.
Okay.
And it was, I work with Matthew Rosenberg on a lot of books, and the way we work is similar to those things where it's a lot of conversation back and forth before we even put anything
Okay.
down.
Yep.
So I was used to that sort of like riffing, right? Where you sit with somebody and you kind of go, okay, what about this? And they go, oh, no, and you pitch back and forth these different ideas. And with me and Matt, there's never any ego involved. It's always just best idea wins. And I got to give so much credit to James and the team at Tiny Onion for the room they put together, because it was the same thing there. Whereas there was truly no ego involved from anyone. It was just it's kind of amazing that it works out. I was hearing stories of other writers' rooms where it's, Che and Hornsack have both worked in TV writers' rooms, and James was at DC forever. And so obviously in a bunch of different summits, rooms there. And uh, it doesn't always, not that it's bad, but it doesn't always go apparently as great as it went with us, where it really was like, the full 13 issues we broke down in 2 days. So it was like we did
Wow.
6 issues, or I guess James had the first issue written, and then it was Michael up to pitch. And then we got up to issue 6 on day one, where it was like, yep, that feels good. Came back on day two, and we did 7 through 12, and then 13, well, 12 and 13 were one, but then the story got so big it made sense to split it. But it really was. I mean, I think for season two, when we do it, I think we're going to add one more day because we were all pretty fried by the end of day two. But it was hard because you're so exhausted because you know, it's that mental tax. You're tossing all these ideas back and forth and keeping the energy up. But the I don't know. I'll spoil some things a little just lightly about the season one, of course. But it was like when we had the turn where I don't remember who said it exactly, but it was like, well, I understand this killer is dead, but their weapon's still in play. What happens if the weapon goes to this person, a civilian? Can they then win it? Um, and it was this thing where it's like, oh, and it's sort of so it was this real thing where we were turning. You know, I think there was a bunch of killers who made it towards the end that Michael and James, when they came up with them, thought like, this might be really fodder. Like they didn't think they would make it as far, and then they ended up being some of the ones who lasted the longest in the game. And so that was the other fun of it too, where it was just like there was never each one of us has a very different sensibility. You know, what I liked so much about um seeing the issues and reading them as not a person who wrote it, but was like, you know, I knew the beats for Porn Sack's issue in issue three, but I didn't know that
Right.
he was going to write it the way he was going to write it. And so he in that issue really focuses on pairs and twos, and you can kind of see how he's turning that constantly. And I thought that was so fun and really exciting. And then he came back and was like, man, the dialogue and the way you're riffing and your issue with Gamer Kid and sort of the nastiness of it, like how mean you are. He's like, I wish I was that mean in my issue. And I was like, hey, killed a lot of babies. But so it was really great. It was fun. You know, and Che has this like very theatrical style to their like sort of, you know, people give speeches and it feels almost more like theater where it's you know, Jordy's issues are so mean too, but like kind of cute with how mean some of the killers. So it was just fun to see how everybody sort of could approach the same material um, that we all broke together, but then each script would surprise us as readers, even though it's like, well, we know each beat. But I don't know. It was really cool. I'm really excited that we're doing it again in September. We're gonna start working on season two, and yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Rad. Did that whole experience change the way you think about writing? Just the collaborative element of it and
100%. I was so nervous going into it because it's, you know, I've only ever worked with Matt in this
yeah.
context, and so there was a little bit of like, well, I don't want to. I'll be quiet off rip. Like I don't want to, you know, come in and make be too loud in a room. But really, it was just so comfortable that it was you sort of like, you know, somebody would try to be like, oh, well, what about this? And it's even in the way I approach writing scripts now has changed just from the process of doing it. You know, I write really pretty detailed page breakdowns before I even go to script now. Where what I used to do is I would sort of have like, okay, I know what the 5 scenes in this issue are gonna be, and I'd have a note card, and then I wouldn't have an exact idea of how many pages they would take. You'd kinda start to parse it out and form it, and now I have these very you know, by the time I go to scripts, with the exception of, like, dialogue, I have everything there, and, you know, that came from being in the room and seeing how, Pornsack was doing his stuff, and I was like, "I think that's gonna work for me. I think that's actually how I would feel better," and so there was a lot of learning in that, you know, I me and Michael being artists, I think we bring, um sort of a visual not a visual first, but we're sort of sometimes thinking like, well, we need the cool image for the issue. Like what's you know, what's the cool image that like you post on Instagram or whatever where
Yeah.
people are like this is the hit and you know, some not that you form a story around it, but you do try to make sure that like, okay, we need to make sure a page isn't so dense that we can't have a cool drawing for the artist to like really captivate the reader with. And then Jordy, I think with her colors and everything, and she is, um, she's really fun in the room. She's somebody who I think pushed everything to be meaner and meaner and meaner. That was really fun to watch her get so revved up and excited about. Well, what if you killed him like this? What if we blew that? And I was like, okay, yeah, yeah, we can do that, Jordy. So yeah,
So with Randy, did you have a lot more, I guess it's weird to say it, but freedom? You know, it was this kind of yours, your baby, yours to kind of run with.
yeah. I mean, you know, the awesome thing about Tiny Onion is was reining me in when I'd get too Looney Tunes. I have a tendency
Okay.
where I started to get a little too crazy on certain things. Like I wrote an entire animated feature where I was like, "Here's the like we could do an issue that's just the Randy movie that they and like all here's the thing where they're like, that's great." I was like, I don't like that's amazing that you made that. Maybe it's a one shot. Maybe it's, but they're like, you don't have the space to do this here. Where it's I would get a little over my skis with all my ideas for what Randy could be because Michael made this beautiful, awesome design that immediately connected with people. But the only text we had for him was, the only thing that ever the man under the mask never mattered. It was always just the suit, and then it was sort of okay. So what do we do with this character? And I at the time I was reading books on on Fleischer Studios and on early animation days and Disneyland and these different things, and the sort of like corporate infighting that happens in these things. And I
Right.
something about that clicked and the Al Columbia stuff, and so it's been I've pretty much had full freedom to tell what Randy's story is. I think the great thing about Tiny Onion is they've reeled me in on some of my more avant-garde intentions for like the book would have been I don't know that any it would have been so much weirder had it been not for them. It would have been yeah, a pretty avant-garde book. And so now it's more in a
Fascinating.
yeah, it's more in a space that I think fits both Exquisite Corpses the worlds and like the series while also being its own thing. What I really think is great about this book is you can just read it. Like say you're just like a Dylan Burnett fan, and you want it's like, oh, you don't have to read Exquisite Corpses. You can just come and read this. And if you like it, cool, there's Exquisite Corpses. Or if you're a big corpse head, like this is, to hold you over until there's the next big thing, season two or, Fox Mass Killer. But it's fun to be able to be like, okay, I can put Rascal Randy like next to Dead Dog's Bite and feel like, yeah, these are both my books.
Okay. Okay. I'm processing that. It's I'm trying to see both of those together. Like, obviously, I don't know where Randy has gone yet, but I'm looking forward to actually kind of being able to see both of those in continuity and drawing some comparisons there. Should
Yeah.
be fascinating. All right. Well, switching gears, I don't want to keep you all day. But I've been keeping up with your Skybound series, Universal Monsters Fan of the Opera. I spent years in theater on the tech side of things and have worked more than one Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, much to my chagrin. This take bridges the gap between Leroux's novel and that.
Mhm.
So, yeah, what fascinated you about getting involved with that property, the Phantom of the Opera property?
Yes, I was so I when they announced the Universal line, I was like, "Man, it would be awesome to write one of those," and I never thought I'd get to write one, let alone Phantom. But I had done another book called You'll Do Bad Things at Image, and the editor at Skybound, Alex Anton, reached out and asked if he could read it, and I sent it to him, and then he was like, "We have Phantom that we're trying to cast, writers for, like, do you have any interest?" And I was like, "I love Phantom. I love the almost every iteration of it I feel like I've seen, and there's so many. And what I really, we specifically are jumping off of the 1943 version, which is the
Yep.
only one to win an Academy Award of the Universal Monsters for set design, and then it's shot in Technicolor, which is super fun. But it felt like such a great job. What I like so much about Phantom is the sort of like who doesn't love a girl gets a promotion at work, but the guy who lives in the basement keeps stalking her. Like it's a very simple story. And then I feel like with the exception of maybe the 20 version, the Lon Chaney version, um, none of them really lean into the horror aspect of it. And so it felt like
Hmm.
to bring in the sort of fun mystery that is, is he a ghost? Where is he living? Is this really happening? But then to really try and make it a horror story and then to have Martin Simmonds be the artist for it really made it a dream project. Martin is a beast on it. And it's really fun too while you're writing it. You're just imagining what he's, leaving him space for things that people know that haven't, the chandelier or, what's the underground catacombs look like? What's our phantom look like? Um, and then also to like trying to do not just the horror take, but you know, my big thing was I wanted to make it Christine's story. I feel like in so many of the phantoms, uh, stories, he's sort of the focus or he's kind of the thing. And it's like, well, it's better if he's more in the shadows and you're unclear about what his wants and intentions are. And Christine always feels like she's sort of just being torn in whatever direction. Is she going to be go with Raul or is she going to go with the fan? And it's about what their wants and needs are, and never about hers. And sort of refocus it and make it more about what Christine's wants and needs are and what she's looking for felt different enough. And then, so I don't know,
Okay.
it felt like we were. It's. I feel like it is a very straight retelling of Phantom of the Opera. Like it is very pretty close to Rue's book with, like you said, um Lloyd Webber's musical, but I think the big change is in how we frame it. So horror,
Yeah.
it's about Christine, and it's about, um, yeah, the sort of the idea of what it means to be great.
Yeah, Martin's work, stellar. Like that visual heavy lifting of what you're trying to convey is so eloquently done there. That romantic aesthetic just gets of the musical anyway, more than like the novel or the movie. That it just strips that away, and it was visually reminiscent of one of my favorites, John J. Muth, and he did. I don't know if you're familiar with the Dracula book that he did. Of course, another Universal Monsters. So it was some kinda hybrid between Muth and Kent Williams to me,
Yeah,
and it created this prevalent overlay of tension and even, like, madness. Like, the characters definitely felt like it felt like the theater itself was starting to cause people to go a little bit crazy.
yeah, yeah. That's a good
Yeah,
way of
yeah.
putting it. But yeah, it's I don't know, and that stuff's so fun too, right? Like the Universal monsters, like Frank, all of them, they're pretty malleable characters. They sort of have
Yeah,
their core themes, and then but there's and their core themes, not that they're so broad, but they're so, I feel like, universal and sort of test of time, true through time. That to get to play with it in the context and when you're making them, feels like, oh, that's why we keep retelling these stories.
absolutely. Well, and thank you for putting a haunted theater. We need more haunted theaters. I've worked in myself in more than one haunted theater, and the Palais Garnier should absolutely be considered a haunted venue. And I've worked in that previously. I think twice over the course of
Oh
of
wow.
my tenure doing shows. Yeah, yeah,
Did
and
they let you get to
it
go down to the basement?
yeah, I had to go with the stagehands because we started talking about, like, the haunted nature of different theaters. So I told him about one that I worked in. So I was the assistant technical director of the Bijou Theater in Knoxville, Tennessee,
Okay.
and not unlike, the Palais, it's, which had the basement, was used as a prison. It was used for executions. So the Bijou Theater was formerly a brothel. It was a Civil War hospital. So
So it's got
all kinds of
ghosts.
weird.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Some just absolutely weird stuff happened. I'll tell you the quick version of this story. One time we were, and people on the podcast, you got to hear it again because I've told this story before. But um, I was on stage with the technical director and a friend who had helped, load out the show. So there's the three of us standing on stage. The whole building was locked up. This is about an 800 seat venue, and the sound booth was on the mezzanine level. And so we're talking and just kind of joking around about the haunted nature of the theater, and the glass for the sound booth pops out, just shatters. And we know nobody else is in the building. It's completely locked up. And so we're like, "What the fuck is going on?" So we go up there, check it out, and the soundboard sits on a table, like a 6-foot folding table, and for it to have risen up and knocked out the glass, because that's where the soundboard is at that point, is right there enough to have bumped it, shattered outward. So it would have had to raise up 4 plus inches. There was no earthquake. There is
Yeah.
no reasonable explanation for how or why this happened. So, anyway, I was explaining that story to them, to the stagehand, and that's how I got the full tour.
Awesome.
So,
That's great. I mean, that's
yeah.
yeah. So how many was is how many haunted? You said it was handful. How many? Is this one your favorite? The last story or?
Probably, well, I have so many good stories with that venue because I got to stay in that venue.
Okay, so
When
yeah,
you are
so
a
it's
tech
just
there. Yeah. Yeah, it's ingrained. So that had, it had the fly rail, had all these actual vaudeville, like, wheat paste, the old posters that are like, maybe 6 feet wide and, 10 feet in vertical dimension. So they're all crusted and sort of falling off. And it's an old, actual bag fly rail system, so it's not, the counterweights are done and you're having to add sand into the bag. Like it is old school
Yeah.
hemp rope theater. But the boiler was, I never ever felt comfortable going down into the boiler room. Like that was super, super creepy. The basement of that place was just not safe. Put it that way. I mean, everybody would get the hair on the back of their neck that
Yeah.
would stand up there. And it just had so much history and so many weird things that would happen. We had WIVK, which is the radio station, or it's a country music radio station. They were doing a remote for Halloween because they had heard the reputation of it being haunted, and it was going through renovation at that time. And the theater's like a $10 million renovation in the mid '90s, and the radio hosts were going to do on the hour every hour a live remote. So they had been doing this since like 7 o'clock or something like that. It's coming up on midnight. And because they're doing this renovation, we set all the power tools off to basically on timers so that they would trigger and go off at midnight when they did their live remote. So all, saws start going off, and we had it, of course, set up so it's actually catching some wood and, throwing some sawdust around and everything like that. So we got in a bit of trouble for that one because the radio announcers ended up swearing on,
They got
live. It was
fined.
like, holy shit, what's going on? Yeah, yeah. So anyway, but yeah, that theater was a lot of fun.
Awesome. I that's it's not a haunting, but there's like in the talk about the research on that thing where it's like you're, finding out about, oh, there was, it was a brothel, it was a Civil War hospital. I was when I was researching for Phantom, I guess in 1900, the way they set up morgues was almost like, most of the population couldn't afford to go to the theater unless you're part of the bourgeois. But the way people would do is they'd go down to the morgue where it was basically just a big window where they would line up bodies because that's how people would come to identify who they were. And so it
Wow.
just became this weird community theater, right? Where it was just everyone's like, oh, let's go down and see who the new bodies are today. And so there's this where it's everybody would come up and there was just the Undertaker would display and they put their clothes above them on a hanger line. And there's a bit in the Phantom book that we do in the first issue with that, but it was just like, oh man, so many crazy things we used to do as a society.
Mm-hmm. I know. And everybody's so boring now. They just want to stay inside. I don't get it. It's strange. Yeah, my son is 18 and he's going to college in the fall, and it seems like that entire generation is just, I don't know, they're just happier to stay home. It's strange.
Yeah, it's almost like there was a global thing that made us all,
Pandemic.
yeah, that made us all stay inside for a while.
Well,
Um,
issue 4, go ahead. Go
no,
ahead.
no, no. Congrats to your son going to college. That's exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, he's going into biomedical engineering.
Oh,
So,
amazing.
woohoo. Yeah, yeah. We're very proud. I
That's
won't I won't wax on and on about my
that's amazing.
kid, but I'm
That's
I'm very
awesome.
proud of him. But anyway, so whoa, I don't know what happened there. It blipped out. So issue 4 of Phantom dropped at the end of May, and I've absolutely enjoyed all those Universal Monster adaptations. They all have that twisted and push the source material in such fascinating ways. Um, so make sure to check that out. When's the trade gonna drop of that?
September, so it's got a pretty long tail from when the singles finish, and then yeah, hardcovers I think is end of September, so just before Halloween month.
Okay, cool. And then Rascal Randy is
Uh,
July 8th.
yeah,
Is
so
that
I
what that?
I thought it was gonna be later in July. I didn't like the book just FOC'd yesterday. I was like, oh, it'll be
Yeah.
late, and nope. It's I guess that's what 3 weeks, 4 weeks. But yeah, so July 8th, and then every month after that for 4 months, and then yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to put links in the show notes so everybody can find that, and links for you for socials and stuff. Is there one that you prefer over the other?
I mostly just use Instagram. That's the only one I really interact with
Okay.
begrudgingly. I'm not a huge social media lover.
I get it. I completely understand.
Yeah.
It's a necessary evil,
Yeah.
but yeah. whatever. Well, I always like to finish on a positive note. So around here, we do a shout out. So this can be someone who recently did something nice for you. You just would like to acknowledge them, or something that inspired you. You just like to share. And I'll go first to give you a minute to think about it. My son showed me this absolutely incredible snap video the other night, and I cannot get the song out of my head. It's a teacher who came up with this little sort of pseudo rap that he's talking about, basically how to understand wavelengths in physics, and it was absolutely amazing. It just gave me a little hope that with just a smidge of introduced human creativity, that it's easy to capture people's attention and actually impart some knowledge. And we don't need to do that with AI, right? Simple, basic, fun, and more importantly, it's memorable science. So shout out to the teachers that are putting in the work, because I know it's hard out there. Both my parents were teachers, so yeah,
Yeah.
teacher shout out today for me. So what you got?
I will do so. I just we took our son on his first plane ride and trip already. We took him to New York City this past week, which was where me and my wife lived
Nice.
for 10 years. And not a basketball guy, but it was pretty cool to be there to see the Knicks. Not finish it out. They had one more game to go, but um, my wife was working the whole week, so it was just me and my son. Traversing the city I used to live in, and where I live now, while I love it, I do got to always double check before I cross the street because people just be blowing through stop signs.
Okay.
People be honking at you if you're taking too long with a baby. New York City, you know what? They may not always be nice, but everybody's kind. Anytime you're going up the stairs of the subway with a baby, every single person, you need help, you need help, you need help, going to these things. So shout out New Yorkers, some of the most kindest people in the world. Yeah, go New York.
Nice. That's a great one. You don't often hear the New York is kind shout out, so that's good. All right. Well, Tyler, thanks for coming on, hanging out with me today. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. I appreciate your time.
Of course, anytime. Well, this is Byron O'Neill, and on behalf of all of us at Comic Book Yeti, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Peace.